Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today, we're going to be talking about the newest album from Coldplay, titled A Head Full of Dreams. I gotta be honest with you all folks, I don't really know how to start this review, because let me give you a glimpse into my usual process when it comes to making these. The first bit tends to be done before when I've given the album an in-depth listen, often providing a degree of analysis into my thoughts and research about the band before I start delving into the album in detail, and normally it's framed around some topic I feel will correlate with the album that I'm looking to explore, which can lead to some interesting shifts in perspective mid-review, but hey, that happens, you go with the format. And thus, when I sat down to work on this review, my plan was to start with a lengthy digression on what it means to sell out in today's day and age for an act, because I get the impression that not a lot of people understand what that really means. No, it's not just a genre shift towards pop. You can sell out while still making the same genre of music like hip-hop or rock or country, but it's more focused on a band submitting to the songwriting machine to just crank out hits. And hell, it's not always even a bad thing. Sometimes selling out provides a creative impetus to spark otherwise unknown skills in the artist in question. But the reason why it tends to be regarded by so many, especially critics of the older generation, as a bad thing is that it reflects a loss of artistic integrity and individuality for the artist. And for a critic who will listen to hundreds of albums a year, those individual elements that really stand out from the pack are worth all the more, something that might not always be the case for more casual listeners who wouldn't really pick up on that. So what happens when you get a band like Coldplay, a band that's always played for populism and broad strokes and has enjoyed consistent mainstream success because of it? Would it even be possible for them to sell out, especially considering their newest album, A Head Full of Dreams, was intended as the upbeat resolution to the downcast minimalist breakup album that was very much underwhelming the electronics of Ghost Stories? And sure, they're working with Beyonce and Tove Lo and Stargate, but they were working with pop stars as early as Milo Xyloto back in 2011, and with mainstream producers like Avicii as of last year. This isn't anything that new for them. And yet, when I checked out their lead-off single, Adventure of a Lifetime, on Billboard Breakdown, I got the impression that despite more personal themes, the change in sound might be enough to fall into that sell-out lane. What did become clear was that further investigation would definitely be needed here. So, what did we get with A Head Full of Dreams? Well, folks, I'll be honest, I've really struggled with this review, if only because this album left less than zero impression on me. And as any critic will tell you, middle-of-the-road blandness is the hardest thing to ever write or talk about, because what can you say about a record that takes the broadly positive arc of Coldplay's anthemic hits and spreads it thinner than ever before? I can't even say that it's outright awful, it is just kind of formless. Although I will say, if it's designed to produce any sort of uplifting feeling in me, it falls completely flat on its face. And what's frustrating is that if 5 years ago you had told me that Coldplay was like an album full of affirmation anthems that showed them moving on from trials and soaring up to the heavens, a part of me would be very much behind that. Sure, there wouldn't be a lot of lyrical nuance, but the years where that was even expected from Coldplay are long gone. So, does Coldplay at least deliver here in that uplifting feeling? Well, yes and no. Easily the most emotional pathos and comfort is pulled from Chris Martin opting for a more personal scope by finally putting his failed relationship with Gwyneth Paltrow to bed. But even on fun, he ends the song with the line, "Maybe we could again," which implies there isn't even any closure to the song, even there. But really, this album is aiming bigger than that, grabbing up Eastern Enlightenment philosophy and soaring iconography and symbolism that we've seen in other Coldplay albums, and trying to synthesize, well, something of a mission statement. Probably why they co-opted the cover design from that Bring Me the Horizon album Sempiternal a few years back. And yet, for as much as they push for that transcendence, grabbing up whatever they can, lyrically, this record doesn't so much reach a conclusion or anthemic statement so much as it spreads itself to vaguely positive ideas and never really sticks a landing. Part of this is a lack of specific details, which can only be excused for so long, but part of it is that if you have a record that's all upward momentum with no picture into the darkness or the drama, you can't highlight any contrast. Yes, I know it's supposed to be viewed as a companion piece to Ghost Stories, but where the misery of that record felt perpetually undercut, especially with songs like A Sky Full of Stars, here the soaring drama never really hits any sort of crescendo with real impact, and that's a problem, especially lyrically. Considering how global this album's trying to sound, the fact that it doesn't stick the landing is an issue. And the biggest reason why that comes is in the instrumentation and especially the production. Now, I should just be able to say that this is an issue of swapping out the legendary Brian Eno a few albums back for Stargate. I should just be able to walk away. But it unfortunately runs deeper than that, because sonically, this record rarely feels cohesive at all. There are points where this album tries to go for the rollicking retro disco vibe that's popular now, and you know what? Kudos kudos must be given to Johnny Buckland for at least trying to anchor it in decent melodies, and Noel Gallagher of Oasis handling the outro on the album closer, Up and Up. But take the title track. You have a halfway decent bass groove for the verse and the hook, and then the second you drop into the bridge, it fades into this leaden beat that completely kills any momentum. And considering the song feels like it's missing a verse, again, that's a problem. Hell, the percussion is a mess all over this record. Coldplay has never been a groove-driven band, and their inexperience in structuring them definitely shows in beats that are too stiff to flow well, and yet too blocky to match with the fluttering melodies. And it definitely hurts some otherwise decent songs like Birds and Amazing Day. And production problems are endemic across this album. I like the fluttery, shimmering guitar work across most of this record, but when you have weedy tones like the solo for Birds, and the only thing coming close to an edge coming through courtesy of acoustic strums or maybe the darker rollick of Fun, again, problems. And that's not even getting to the vocal fragments trying to compete for the melody, which frankly feel tacked on when you already have good guitar tones. You don't need that. Or the organ swell in Army of One that really doesn't work when your guitar and bass don't have the depth of tone to match it. Or the outright disaster that is the hidden track X Marks the Spot, where Coldplay tries for their washed out and trap and bass flavored hit with an ugly synth tone and a completely disaffected vocal performance that didn't really do anything for me. It's a moment of total tonal whiplash that honestly highlights what many of the minor key progressions across this record only hint at. This album really isn't quite as bright or powerful or fun as it wants to be, especially considering songs like Paradise or Hurts Like Heaven hit far stronger from Milo Xyloto 4 years ago, and a big part of this is mood and tone. Many people default to Coldplay as a poor man's U2, but at least U2 understood when they made albums like Pop to cloak the entire album in self-aware irony, or at least try for a veneer of cool, something to which Chris Martin's bull-faced, wistful sincerity doesn't fit at all. While I praise the hell out of his falsetto and voice in the past, his willowy tone doesn't have anything close to tightness to match this instrumentation, and his stabs at adapting his populist euphoria to modern pop trends is jarring as hell. And it's definitely not helped by the vocal production and how this record does absolutely nothing with any of its guest stars. Putting aside the fact that Beyonce sounds completely checked out on Him for the Weekend, she's treated as a glorified background vocalist, and the production on the keys, the horns, and the guitar lamp is painfully thin and cheap. Especially with the clap percussion, it just sounds phoned in. Considering this song is supposed to be venerating her as an angel, she's more of an implication than a real presence on the song. Again, another pretty big problem here. When you have Beyonce, use Beyonce. Similar case for Tove Lo. None of the raw vocal power that colored her biggest hits of that debut album shows up here. Most because this record seems petrified of any sort of real visceral crunch that can possibly alienate any listeners. And then there's Gwyneth Paltrow on Everglow, and given how many layers are piled into her voice, you can barely tell that it's her. So yeah, to circle back to my original case about selling out, my hope is that Coldplay would at least be able to bring together an emotionally compelling or soaring recovery narrative to avoid that label, and yet so much of this album feels driven by committee and focus groups and a creative impulse. So terrified of offending anyone, then I'm shocked that they actually bothered to grab that little snippet of President Obama singing badly Amazing Grace at that funeral for one of the two pointless interludes where they ramble on about Eastern philosophy. And the frustrating part is that there are moments where there is real emotional poignancy on Fun and Everglow and Up and Up that might not be that unique from a compositional standpoint, but they at least felt real and personal. I got something from them. But the rest of the sound, it feels spread very thin, with none of the crescendos or sense of emotional drama to land that broader impact, and production that goes Coldplay none of the swell and power that they once had. Again, I'm coming from Viva La Vida, Death and All His Friends, or Milo Xyloto. They had impact with me, but this just doesn't. For me, this record's a 5 out of 10, and the more I listen through this album, the more that feels generous. And if this is the final note that they want to go out on, if this really is their last album, sad to say it, but for all of Coldplay's dreams, this might be one of their least inspiring. Just saying. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. Anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, or any other albums coming out that you want me to take a look at, I'd be more than happy to give a listen. Keep in mind, this is all just my opinion, for whatever that's worth. Till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.